Welcome to the What's Lacking podcast. It's your host, Larry Atencia. With me today is Joel Serin-Christ. How do we know each other, Joel?
We know each other through a mutual friend. You did Teach for America in the Bay. I did Teach for America in Philly, but came back to the Bay to work. And we met each other through someone that I was working with who had done Teach for America with you.
Yeah, so we have that connection through Teach for America. And what year was this?
I came back to the Bay in 2013. No, 2012. So we must have met like mid 2012 or late 2012, early 2013. I
Okay,
would
yeah.
guess.
All right. And do you mind saying the name of the person that introduced us, just so that we could give them a shout out?
Oh yes. Well, I worked with Sarah Cavrell at the time, and she was dating Eric Reichenbacher, who was one of your good friends, and
Right.
so that was the connection.
Shout out to Sarah, and it was 2012, and we have been friends ever since, right? Really close friends, actually. So yeah. And what do you do for a living?
So I'm a documentary filmmaker, a video producer, and what I'd call an impact storyteller.
And you have recently started your own company. You want to get a little bit into that, or?
Yeah. So, um, Collective Focus Films is a film and video agency that I just started with a dear friend, longtime colleague, Fabiola Leyva. And it comes from work we were doing at Teach for America. We had launched a video studio as part of the alumni magazine at Teach for America, and had some success. Went to some film festivals, won an award. Were invited to South by Southwest to speak about our process, and so we recently spun that off into an independent studio, um, and we are the goal of which is to work with other nonprofits or foundations or basically anyone or any organization that's trying to do good in the world, that's trying to make a positive impact. We want to help them through video storytelling, or short films, and so that's our goal, and we've got a lot of experience, and we're excited to see where it takes us.
Yeah. Shout out to Favi as well, another good friend of ours. I met her through you and your wife Bianca, which is getting ahead
Mhm.
of the next question. But um, I know we had spoken about this, and you sent me the website, and I mean, I knew you were doing great work. We we've been friends for a long time, so I had seen some of the work in the magazine, some of the videos, etc. But just seeing the website and just seeing the accolades just reminded me of like just the great work that you've done, and exciting to be like associated, affiliated with you. I was like, oh yeah, that's my friend. Yes.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, we'll get into this, but I think that every project has been a step forward, and we've navigated some big challenges, and we've learned a ton. And Fav and I are both trained in different ways for this, for filmmaking and video producing, but finding kind of like the niche of what you want to do with the skill that you're interested in is a journey, and this feels like a really natural and an exciting next step. Um, and yeah, I'm really proud of what we've done. I think there is better work to come, and that's what I'm really really excited about.
Yeah, I'm excited as well to see what's next, and the next productions, and just seeing the trajectory of this, and your journey, like you said. Are you married with children? I kind of already stated a bit about that, but yeah, tell us more about your marital status and children.
Yeah, I'm married. My partner Bianca and I have been together for we started dating in 2010. So 13 years, more than 13 years now. Favi, who is my colleague and longtime collaborator, was her college roommate for all 4 years. So I've also known Favi for that amount of time. Um, Maybe a little bit longer. I've known Favi. And we have a now 21 month old, um gonna turn 2 in September, and his name is Joaquin. and he's incredible. I think they are like the two things I'm most grateful for every day when I wake up. Is like that relationship I have with my partner Bianca, whom we've been through a lot together, and I like still just have so much fun and feel so much like security and grounding with her. And then like this little kid, this like charismatic, um, wildly intelligent, like universe shoved into a 21-month-old body is like just blows me away constantly. So I feel so grateful for them, and I don't think that like having a family would have always been something that I would have expected as like a big piece of my identity. Like claiming of being part of a family or having a family is like something that would like really influence me, and that was probably very naive and ignorant. And now I just like I love it. I love
Hmm.
being part of a family. I love the idea of having a family. And I love the process of building family traditions and values and experiences and memories. And so it's probably the thing I'm most grateful for in life.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that last part of your response, which is just the naivete that comes with thinking that having a family won't completely and fundamentally change you in just so much in so many ways. So I went through the same thing, and perhaps even more extreme for me, just because I never really even considered until very recently, relatively speaking, the idea of settling down, having children, and being a family man. But once I did, it's just sort of completely rearranged my sense of who I was and what I want in the future to be, and um, sort of shifted ideas of who I was completely lost and had no sense of what life was really about and the meaning and the purpose of it, and just being able to experience it. I think is something that I'm completely grateful for, just because I don't know if I hadn't made that decision, if my life would have been as great as it is now.
Yeah, yeah, I totally hear that. I think there's like moments in my life, I don't know how serious they were, like whether I was like trying on various personas or like tricking myself into narratives. There's like moments in my life where I like for sure and I was young and dumb. Like these are like, like high like I remember being in high school thinking like I don't need to ever get married. Like there's that. And then there's like that like hyper idealist phase where I was like, the world is so overpopulated and all humans do is mess things up. Like, why would I bring another kid into that? And I still struggle with that second one from time to time. Um, but I think it's like partnership and community are I've come to believe are like very fundamental aspects of the human experience. And partnership can look lots of different ways, and community can look lots of different ways. It's like the institution of marriage is not necessarily the thing that like needs to be binding people. um but I think that like being in community with others and being in close partnership with a handful of people, or at least one, is like is essential to feeling like you're experiencing life as a human.
Yeah, agreed. Um, how was your experience with your parents growing up? What was your childhood like?
My parents were very hands off, and I don't know why totally. I was the second child. My sister was 8 years older than me, so there's like this big gap in between. I thought until very recently, and I'm not sure I still fully believe my dad's answer, that I was like for sure a mistake. Um, because I like I didn't know why they would wait 8 years having one. So I was like, that's what I spent most of my life thinking. And it wasn't a bad thing. I was just like,
Right.
what it is. Um, I didn't like in middle school and high school, like there weren't a ton of rules. There weren't like really curfews. I like didn't really get in trouble that much, although I did plenty of stuff that I should have gotten in trouble for. it was, I feel like, grateful that a lot of it was like, you want to go discover stuff, like go discover stuff. Like both supported me in a hands-off way to pursue the things I wanted. Um, and I'll give you an example. Like I loved soccer and I really wanted to play soccer, and I played soccer a lot, played soccer all the way through high school. And I was on a competitive team and I wanted to go try out for this competitive team. And my mom was like, great, you can try out for this competitive team. You know, these are like, it was like these regional teams. And this one was in Richmond, in West Contra Costa, just north of where we lived in Albany. And it was, and so I tried out, I made the team. I don't remember if my mom brought me to the tryout or not, but the moment I made the team, she was like, this is great. If you want to do it, go do it. I'm not going to take you to practice. Practice was like way out in Hercules, and like, you know where Hercules is compared to
Hmm.
all, like practice was in a few different spots. It was either in kind of like North Richmond or San Pablo Pinole or Hercules, and it kind of changed. And I was like, okay. And so I was a freshman, I think, maybe a sophomore. I didn't have a license. And so I would like get out of school and run to the bus, the high school, run to the bus, get on the bus, and travel for like through 2 transfers, I think, for like 45 minutes to get to my field. And then when I was done with soccer at the end of practice, I would like run again to the bus, take it to the Richmond BART station, and then take BART home. And if I like missed the bus, I was like screwed, and I wouldn't be getting home until like 9 p.m. and I'd be walking back alone from El Cerrito Plaza to my house. And I remember like my teammates were like, "What the hell is wrong with your parents, man?" And they like never came to away games. You know, like, you know, we were a traveling team, and I would like stay in hotel rooms with like the 2 other kids whose parents would like never come. And we were called like jokingly like the orphans.
Yeah.
In like the coaches would like take us out to dinners and stuff. But like, it's not because I, it's not because they couldn't come. They just like, they made it clear that I had the agency to do it. And that I, if I wanted to pursue it, I could,
Right.
and I had to figure it out. And so I did.
Do you think it was a way of teaching you independence and just fending for yourself? What do you attribute that level of hands-offness to?
Yeah, it might have been partly that. You know, that's like the nice way to look at it, is like, oh, they were really like equipping me with tools to navigate the future. I also think they probably like needed or wanted to draw some pretty clear lines of like how much they spent their time, how much their world revolved around me and the
Mhm.
things that I was doing versus how much they had time for themselves. And that's an interesting lesson that I think about a lot now as a parent too, is like, how do I support Joaquin without him being my entire, you know, like,
Mhm.
there's like a cliche of like, oh, you are my world. Like, I don't think I want that for my relationship with my kid. Like, I think I want him to have his life, and I want to have my life, and I want Bianca and I to have like our own lives. And I think when they come, like, to create space for those to come together in some really fun and meaningful ways. But yeah, I think a big part of it was like, they just
Yeah.
didn't want to their lives to be totally ruled by my schedule.
Right. Like family as a collaboration between fully autonomous individuals as opposed to a hierarchy and the smothering of like the maternal figure, or even, the sort of authoritarian father figure where, maybe that leads to some subsequent traumas and issues, whereas, you seem pretty well adjusted, and that you had a pretty good outcome with that sort of parenting style, right? Like,
I mean, TBD, right? Like there's things like, I think there's things wrapped up in that. I don't think it wasn't always easy. And I think there are probably moments in my life where I could have benefited from some more guidance, or just like hands-on directional encouragement. Like, this is a
Mhm.
route that I know you think you don't want to take, but you should just do this for a little bit longer.
Right.
Um, I think we learn a lot about ourselves by going through challenges and finding our own ways. And I had a lot of experience of that from like a very early age. And like, man, we got into some shit. Like, I don't know. I think about Joaquin's generation. This kid is like 1.5, and I was at this park down by the bay. You ever been to Discovery Park in the marina in Berkeley?
Is it like a playground or?
Yeah, it's a playground. So like, here's what it
I
is.
I
You
think I
walk
have.
in, you walk in and you're a kid. And there's all this like janky stuff built out of wood, like these big kind of like tree houses
Mhm.
and climbing structures. There's like a zip line. Um, it's all painted weird. And the whole idea of this place is the kids build the structures. So you
Okay.
walk in as a kid and you get a hammer and you get nails and you go find wood and you hammer
Mhm.
these things together. And if you want paint, you get paint. And like you get there's some kind of prize for picking up loose nails that are scattered all over the playground.
Right.
And like this is a place I went often, right? Like my dad was a carpenter. And so like I remember like sawing things and like whittling with knives as like a little kid. And I like cut myself up a lot. And I like how parents like how my parents kind of approached parenting was like try not to die
Mhm.
and like learn some stuff. And like, I was like out all times a day. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have
Exactly.
pagers. Like no one knew where I was at. Like we had this time, there's this hill, Albany Hill up just like right behind me. And on the backside of Albany, have you heard this story where like the swing story, the Albany Hill swing story?
No,
All right, do you want to hear it? I don't like, are
of
we way
course.
off? Okay.
No, no, no.
So this is one of, like this is my like what's the movie Stand By Me where like the kids get stuck on a train track and like they almost
Yeah.
die. Okay,
Mhm.
this is like my Stand By Me moment where like I say Larry, like I saved someone's life on this day. So there's a swing on the backside of this hill. Basically, this hill has a steep incline. It goes down, and at one point there's a big tree, and hanging from that tree is a big rope. And that's it. Like the rope might have some knots on it, and I think it has like one plank of wood. This was back in like 2000. We were in middle school. And we used to go up on that swing and you'd swing. So you'd like start up at the top of the hill and you'd run down the hill and you'd swing and the hill would drop away below you. And you'd like swing way out. And you'd like, it was crazy. Like you'd be high. There's like no net, there's rocks below you.
Right.
Um, so
I usually see those type of contraptions when there's like a body of water
mm-mm.
at the other end, and then you just let go. But no, this one is just like, yeah,
This one you just swing out over a cliff and then you
exactly,
come
and
back.
come back. Yeah.
And that's it. And so we had a group of friends. We were out roaming. We were up on Albany Hill because it was like a place to explore. It's just like a bunch of trees. There's some houses, but once you get to the top, it's just kind of not a forest really, but like it's open. So we have one, like there's always that one really athletic friend in a group, and that was not me, but we had like a really athletic friend, and so he was like, "Let me like." We were all taking turns on the swing. Then he starts on the swing and he like pulls the rope all the way up as far up the hill as he can, and he just like sprints and he goes all the way out. And there's another tree further down the hill, right? And so he goes all the way out, and there's this branch sticking out, and he reaches out and he like touches this branch. And now remember that the hill is sloping down as the swing is going up. So that branch has to be like 40, 50 feet above the ground. Like it's really high up, maybe 30. I'm in middle school, so I might, but it's like high. It's like very, very high. So he touches this branch, and we're like, oh snap. He comes back down, and we have never seen anybody do that before. And so we were like very impressed. And then he's like, he does it again. And this time he wraps his arm around it. And he's like hanging out, and we're like, yo, Amar, like that is nuts. Like that's crazy. He comes back down. And so this time he's like, yo, pull me as far back as you can so that I can go further back.
It's like,
And
bro,
so
we already gave you the props. It's okay. We can go.
so he goes, he pulls himself, he pulls himself, he pulls himself. We pull him and we like run, and he goes down and he wraps his legs around this. He wraps his legs around this branch, and he's up there, and we're all like, we all feel victorious, like we just conquered the swing. No one will ever have as triumphant a moment on this string as us. Like we are the kings of the swing of Albany Hill, and we're like, okay, like time to go. Like let's go, kid. And he's hanging on, he's got his arms are like stretched out on the rope, and his body is like bridged with his legs wrapped around this branch of the tree. And so he's like, all right. And he just like jerks a little bit and then stops. And we're like, all right, let's go, come down. And he's like, guys, like I can't, I'm stuck.
Ooh.
And we're like, what do you mean you're stuck? And he says, my shoelace is caught
Oh,
like on a branch on the back end of this tree. I can't get down. And we're like, well, like try and pull yourself up so it loosens the shoelace. And He's like, I can't, I'm too stretched out. I'm like, well, try and like kick your shoe off. He's like, I can't take off my shoe. It stretched it pulled the shoe too tight. And he's up there and he's like, I'm shaking. I can't hold on much longer. And so now we got this friend who's like hanging suspended with two hands on a rope and a shoe stuck on a branch somewhere between 30 and 50 feet up in the air above rocks. And we're in middle school. And he's like, you have to help me. And you know, you go through like the checklist of things to do as a kid. It's like, we don't have cell phones, so we can't call anyone. We can't get like, we don't have enough time to go run and get help from anywhere. There's no houses nearby. He can't get down. So I like climb up the tree, and I don't really have a plan, but I was like, I can't do anything from down here. Maybe I can do something from up there. I climb up the tree. I like shimmy out onto this branch. And so now I'm above him looking down, and his shoelace, the loop of his shoelace is like caught around a branch that had been cut off. And so it's like this thick stump of a branch, and his shoelace is like wedged in the crevice. And I try to pull him back and like get the shoelace off. And I try to like get his shoe off, and there's like no way. And he's like sweating, and like, you know, his muscles are just like shaking.
Barely holding on.
And he's barely holding on. Like, you know, kids down, like the other kids are like piling backpacks under, like way down on the ground. Like we don't know what to do. It's like some kids are like hiding. It's stressful. And so I like yell at someone to throw me up keys, and someone like climbs partway up the tree, tosses me keys. Somehow I catch them, and I like saw through his shoelace, and it snaps, and he like flies back down, and like 10 feet from the ground, he just like lets go and just like spread eagles on it, and just like hits the ground and just like lies there face down, like
safety.
Oh, and I like, it took me, I had to like calm down, and then I had to somehow get off that tree, which was its own, you know, which I remember being like at some point realizing like, whoa, I'm really, really high up here. You know, and then we went home and like never told our parents about that. like no one ever knew about that.
So middle school,
yeah,
this is like a life or death situation. Did this create a lasting bond between you and Amar, did you say? Yeah. And where is he now? Like, are you guys still friends? Is this something that you kind of bring up randomly, or you just lost contact with him?
Yeah, we lost contact. I've talked about it with the other group of friends, with like, I'm still in contact with some of the group of friends that were there. Yeah, someone actually contacted me about it recently, and we were at a wedding of a high school friend, and they were talking about it, and they're like, you know, it was so long ago, and I didn't talk about it that much afterwards because it was so intense that it's like hard to know what was true and what was not. But like, you know, we all found ourselves, many of us found ourselves at this wedding again, and we were talking about it, and it's like, oh yeah, dude, like that was what happened. Like that really, yeah, that was really a life or death situation. Amar and I were friends we were very close friends through middle school, and then, you know, high school things happen, you know, groups expand and contract, and things kind of happen.
Yeah. I think ultimately the lesson that you were trying to teach us was that there's this sense of micromanaging and coddling of this generation and children, whereas our generation and previous generations obviously just had more freedom. Parents were less obsessed with security and the outside world being this sort of alarmist and potentially dangerous lurking place. I think people knew obviously that things could happen, but I think they had more of a sense of maybe probabilistic or statistical sense of, well, you know, what's the worst that could happen, and what are the trade-offs between going overboard in terms of protection and just, you know, creating bubble boys and bubble girls, and the sense of allowing children to go through challenges so that they could develop, you know, their individuality, they could develop a sense of, you know, strength and being in the world, you know, and survival. Maybe we are losing that, or
maybe like I don't know how conscious it was, or if it was just like there wasn't the tools, like you couldn't you couldn't monitor your kid all the time. You had to just,
Good point.
you had to just let them go. Um, and they didn't have time or capacity or money to have someone like constantly around, like that wasn't a thing. I mean, for most of humanity, kids were growing up like in like like in the agricultural or like urban settings with very little oversight,
Mhm.
and things would happen. Um,
And
yeah, I think kids
and
have
what
the
like
capacity to deal with
a
crisis a lot more than we give them credit for.
Yeah, and maybe, depending on the historical era, 40 to 25% infant mortality rate. So
Right. Right.
if something doesn't happen while they're playing, we have bacteria, we have viruses, we have malnutrition, like there's literally so many things that could potentially take this child that I'm just gonna have to allow for them to just go out in the world and see if they survive. Whereas now, I mean, it's the infant mortality rate in developed countries is minuscule. Also, the rate of children that people have is diminishing, and so you invest so much more worth and value on each of the children that you have, as opposed to having 13 kids and you're like, well, I lost this one, I am sad, but
Right.
I
Right.
have 12
Right.
others.
Right.
Whereas like
We
we
got backup.
we have Marilyn and Joaquin, and it's only them. I mean, just think of the sort of existential despair that we would feel if we ever lost them or something really bad happened to them. So I think psychologically and just the way in which we relate to our children in developed countries now, as opposed to maybe even 60, 70, years ago is completely different.
Totally. I think there's something else there too. I think we have lost a relationship, or yeah, I think our relationship with death has changed. Like, I don't know if we have had enough ex yeah, I I think that we do not have the same proximity to death.
Mhm.
Many of us in the developed country, and especially like in urban and suburban settings, do not have the same proximity, familiarity, or comfort with the idea of death that that was necessary and is necessary still. And not comfort as in like I enjoy death or I like death or it like gives me comfort, but that it's like a thing that happens
Mhm.
that is to be recognized and moved through. um I think like so much of the narrative is about like escaping death or running away from death or putting off death. um and when death happens, like not talking about it or not letting it like affect other, personal, like the personal experience or the communal experience. And as someone who has like experienced the death of family members and of my mom, like I think that being exposed to danger and being exposed to loss and grief and death at an early age is actually something that humans are like very well suited and developed to do. And maybe not even are we capable of doing it, but like maybe it's actually beneficial
Mhm.
for us to go through those processes and understand them young, so that we can continue to navigate them as adults.
Yeah, I think, just thinking about it dialectically, grief, death, danger could help you appreciate life and security and stability and love, right? So you can't have one without the other.
Totally.
Uh, yeah.
Totally. And I think about that a lot. I think about like there's some passage I read somewhere that was talking about like the soul as a vessel, like imagine a wooden vessel. Like that is inside you. That's your soul. And every time grief or tragedy happens, you carve a little bit out from this vessel and it gets deeper and it gets emptier, and there's more space opened up in that vessel. And you lose something, right? Like you lose something in that process. But what you gain is a greater capacity to fill that
Mhm.
vessel up with things like gratitude and joy, um, and light. And I like that idea, and I try to I try to subscribe to it and consider that.
That's a great metaphor. In terms of your educational experience, how was that like?
Interesting. My mom was a public school teacher, so a special ed teacher. My aunts were all special ed teachers. I went to the Albany public school system is great. It gets a ton of funding from a horse race track. It's small. I was okay at school. I was like, I knew I could do great at school if that's what I wanted to do, and that was never necessarily my number one priority. I frustrated my dad to no end because my report cards would come home and I'd get, B's and A's, nothing bad, like good grades. My sister was like straight A pluses, fantastic. My report card was like always a mixed bag, and every class for a while, I remember like from the moment we started getting report cards on, said excessive talk and disruption. Every class, but a lot of them also said a pleasure to have in class. And so like, there's like some charisma I brought to that disruption, that got me into some trouble, but also, let me build some relationships with teachers. School was fine. I think I always knew that there was like more interesting learning to be done outside of school. I loved learning, and I still love learning, and I loved experiencing new things, and I still love that. And school felt a little prescriptive to me. And I could, I think I could tell like the teachers that were there to do something special and the teachers that were there to be there. And I gave some teachers a harder time than others.
Yeah. What are your views on politics?
Oof. I would I would classify myself as like a very progressive. I'm the son of Berkeley hippies of like, yeah, so very progressive, socially progressive, environmentally progressive. I think that I subscribe to a form of democracy with a strong socialism component. Yeah, that's what.
How has there been any sort of changes in your political outlook before and after, you know, becoming a dad, or not really? It's been pretty consistent for most of your life, and there hasn't been that crazy of a tectonic shift.
I don't think becoming a dad was anything that shifted it. I think like Trump being elected and COVID were two things that really shifted or like caused me to think more critically about certain systems. I mean, I don't think that American democracy, as we've set it up, is equitable or even really that functional for most people. And it's definitely like rooted in historical racism and oppression and exploitation and genocide. So like I don't think like democracy as we experience it is something that I think should be like replicated or held up as any kind of example. But I think I've felt that for a long time. I think what I started to question recently is like, I think I had naively assumed that while there was lots of damage being done, that there was an arc moving in a positive direction,
Mhm.
and that this vehicle of our like political system and society was worth like driving in that like being a
Mhm.
part of, like pushing in that direction. And I think I've thus realized or come to believe that it is like much more fragile and misdirected than I had originally assumed.
Right. And then the fragility of it is something that could be strengthened by implementing or um, copying more like social democratic forms of government, a la Sweden, the Nordic countries, Europe, Canada, or is it more of a complete recreation of new experiments in government or self organization, etc.?
I don't think I like know enough about politics to answer that. I I think that like tearing it down
Don't
Here's,
sell yourself short. I mean, I think
here's
we're
my
not.
challenge. Here's my challenge with tearing it down. Like,
Okay.
I think there's a chance that if we were to like piecemeal together our favorite parts of different political structures from across the globe and across history and across I like theory, we would never get to the state that we would hope. So maybe that's like maybe that process isn't right and it's too slow. However, if we tear something down that we know is unjust or wrong or harmful, and we don't have a clear vision of what's going to go in its place, we run the risk of a similarly or more harmful system being constructed because we don't have anything to prove. Like there's no point in history that has proven that like it's possible for us to start from scratch and construct something excellent.
Right.
Yeah. So maybe I'm just like a little bit more of a yeah, a little bit shy
Hmm.
uh of big change. I think I prefer to take the route of changing like adding pieces and changing pieces to of a system rather than like tearing it down and starting from scratch.
Right. Like reformism and just a sort of, not to say that you're conservative, but just the Burkean idea of small incremental changes as opposed to, wholesale radical
I mean,
changes
I'm
that, could
yeah,
lead to catastrophic results, such as all of the mid 20th, 20th century experiments in socialism and communism and other forms, right? So,
yeah, yeah.
like,
Because it comes down to power, right? Like it comes down to power. If you're gonna tear something down, but you're not gonna fix, but you're not gonna, you have to have some kind of system to ensure that power is distributed equally. Otherwise, if you tear something down, the people who want power or who already have power are gonna keep power or create a system that gives them more power.
right,
And so you can't deter that without having some kind of system in place. And if you tear all the systems down, you don't have a system in place. I don't know how to solve that conundrum. Incremental change is like not enough, and I know, and like I believe that, and I know that, and yet imposing big change on lots of people doesn't seem to
yeah,
have, like isn't a good game either. So you know, I,
yeah,
so I don't know. I just try to be the
yeah,
best person I am, and like, and that's what I think like where I find so much solace in my work, is that I think that one of the biggest keys to changing hearts and minds and creating a vision for a different future is storytelling. And one of the most powerful forms of storytelling we have that is, you know, most accessible and most consumed is video. And so to be a video storyteller that explores ideas in of social impact and social progress, and a documentary filmmaker and that kind of lives in that world is something that feels really fulfilling to me and feels important to be doing.
yeah. I think I I agree completely in the sense of a lot of the political changes and just the cultural changes that are necessary and that would make this country and, just globally speaking in different places, better places to live and better places to be in community with others, is shifting and changing the stories we tell ourselves, right? So if if anything, that should always be the first step, in terms of just a psychological shift and a narrative shift, about who we are, how we relate to others, and the sort of stories that are most important to make those next political material changes happen, right? So,
Yeah.
but a lot of times it's the opposite. It's like, oh, let's just have changes, and with those changes, the psychological changes will follow.
I don't think humans are that smart, like in
Yeah.
the end. I think like I think we like to copy things that we see or hear. Like, we got young kids. Like it's really just you see the thing, you mimic the thing. And I do that I do that as a creative person.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, that's really cool. How could I bring that into my work? And I see that in like sci-fi and science. Like sci-fi is creating these ideas science kind of decides to work towards them. And I think that the story comes before the work, right?
Yeah.
And so I think like creating the narrative, and that's why I think like tearing something down without having a vision for what's going to replace it is so dangerous. Because I think you need to tell the story of what comes next. You need to create the vision. You need to give people the idea, the framework for what comes next, and then they can start to move towards that. And so yeah, I think storytelling is it. And I think like you were talking about society and how we relate to people. I think that like I think we also need to reconsider our relationship to earth and nature as a part of this, because when we separate ourselves from all of these interwoven systems, we like set ourselves up for failure. And nature is one of these places where you can just learn a lot from. Like, how do you have an interconnected ecosystem in which there is both competition and symbiotic relationships?
Mm-hmm.
Let's look at a forest. Like, let's look at a coral reef. You know, like there's systems out there that have navigated this with a lot of diversity. Like, the human race is not that impressive as when it comes to like what we're able to do with amongst ourselves, or with amongst, like, in relation to other species. We could learn a lot by like thinking about how we relate to other life on Earth much more deeply.
Right. Yeah. And then, how we're embedded in a larger organic life form
Yeah.
whose health is also something that affects our health. And that interconnectedness is something that we need to put in the forefront, as opposed to having a myopic idea of our species as being separate or special, etc. Not to say that we shouldn't take our interest into account, or that we aren't special, but others are too. Creation, existence, the universe, all of this partakes in that sort of specialness and mystery of creation. So yeah,
I don't know, man. I don't know if we are that special. Like, I don't know if like me, Joel, Serin-Christ is that special. I like myself a lot. Like, I think I'm like cool, but like,
I mean, us as a species, right? Like, I don't think I'm that special either
no,
as an individual, but as a species,
we're definitely not that
there is
special. We're
something.
definitely not that special. But I think part of the problem with our like human exceptionalism is that it's now been drawn down to the individual level too, where everyone thinks that
Right.
like, you know, everyone thinks that like they are something fresh. And I think that everyone is precious. I was going to use that. I think everyone is precious and like ultimately necessary for like a flourishing collective life. But I think independently, our needs are like desires, our wants are not paramount. Like, they're not, on the scheme of things, they are not the most important thing. And we prioritize individual well-being, but I think that actually we'd be individually more well if we lived more collectively, both collectively with each other as humans and collectively with other life on Earth.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that is true. In terms of like, in the long run, nature and existence will continue.
Fuck the line. I think the short run, dude. Like there's research about like like green therapy. Go out for a walk in a park and like what it does to your mood, what it does to your health, what it does to your blood pressure. Like, there's like there's like short-term science to support this. It doesn't have to be like geologic timescale, although it helps to think that way. But like, I think daily life, getting more in touch with other people and other forms of life, can greatly increase quality of life and well-being.
Yeah, I agree completely. I was sort of getting into my wooey spiritual talk, which is a good transition into my next question, which is, what are your religious views?
I am Jewish. I'm Jewish. I found like a religious identity much later in life. My mom was Jewish, but we called it like culturally Jewish or ethnically Jewish. We celebrated 2 holidays, and not even like necessarily the most important ones. It was Hanukkah and Passover.
Secular Judaism, right?
Secular Judaism. And my dad was Catholic, grew up Catholic from working class Eastern European family in New Jersey. And Catholicism was huge in his life. Judaism was not big in my mom's life. In fact, my mom's parents at some point associated a lot with Quakers and would go to like Quaker meeting houses, and they were in Pennsylvania for a while and then New Jersey, and ultimately moved to Manchester, England, where they were part of a Quaker friends group, I think it's called. But Catholicism was big in my dad's life, and he was an altar boy. He went to mass every day in the morning before school. And he went to Notre Dame. And then at some point he stopped believing in God, stopped believing in Catholicism, started dating a Jewish woman, grew his hair out, and moved to Berkeley. And his mom stopped talking to him for about 10 years.
Yeah.
And that was really, I think that was really traumatic for him. And so I grew up with like a very healthy dose of skepticism for institutionalized religion that I still carry with me to this day. But I've found Judaism to be a really powerful connection to ancestry and history, and maybe more than anything, tradition, like as a vehicle to bring people together and form relationships over annual traditions, and storytelling. I've really appreciated being Jewish.
Yeah.
As an adult, and it didn't start until really I had graduated college, and I had mentioned that my mom died. She died of Alzheimer's, and as she was declining, it was a way to kind of like connect to her and her legacy and kind of carry that on. So it felt important. And now Joaquin's Jewish, or if he chooses to continue that route, he can be Jewish.
That's going to be my strategy. If I want Maryland to be religious, I'll just harp on all of the historical injustices and all of the negative things that religious institutions have done. Or it seems like children just to individuate tend to go against the wishes and the teachings of the parents. So just a strategic tip right there.
Yeah, it worked for me. My parents tried really hard to keep me out of religion.
Are you doing anything toward self-improvement?
I don't know how to answer this question. I think I've been thinking a lot about how that which you focus on grows, and so trying to move my energy to places where I feel excited or where I'm curious. So what does that look like? I'm like journaling every day when I can is big for me. Reading. We don't have TV, so we don't watch a lot of TV. And then collective focus films, I think, is like this whole practice in distilling values and interests into a business that I can live through, hopefully.
Yeah. Is the not having a television in your home a new thing, or?
No, we got rid of the TV. I think we got rid of the TV before Joaquin was born.
Okay.
But I'm not totally sure. I'm trying to remember if we had a TV during the pandemic.
Okay.
Might have. But yeah, no, we haven't had TV for a while.
Too much of a distraction, or just you didn't want Joaquin to be exposed to, the black mirror and the black screen and what that could do to his intellectual development, etc.? Or
I think both. I think a lot about design and how design facilitates experience, and also design, I think, communicates values. Mm-hmm. So how a space is designed communicates what the priority of the actions are that you want people to take in that space. And so, like a TV is like always in the middle of the biggest room where you want everyone to gather together. And so what does that say about how you want to engage with people or not? And I thought about that for a long time. And so we got rid of it. And it's, what do you want to do in this room now? Now it's like we have music that we play in that room, and we sit there and we'll read or we'll talk. And that's the life that I'd like to cultivate more than one that revolves around TV.
Yeah, I agree with that. Although one could say, a television that is centered in a room acts as like a postmodern technological hearth, right? Because we're surrounded by narratives and stories, like you were saying, right? Whereas previously, the fire and the hearth acted as a place to gather around to tell stories, and today the digital light is what we gather around to hear stories. I mean, not to say that that's a positive development in the sense that one is passive and the other is active, but you
Right.
know,
Right. And one is individual and one is collective.
yeah, that's true. Although
Even if
no,
you
but I
watch,
meant
even if you watch things together, it's an individual.
okay, yeah,
It's individual.
yeah,
I,
because
in
that's
my
what
opinion, in my opinion.
no, yeah, yeah. And I agree. Although I think of our friendship and just things that we've done with other people in terms of like just watching sports um, on television and just enjoying a movie with Marilyn and Paula and with family members. I think obviously it isn't as powerful as other things, but sometimes you have to um, do what you can and meet
Yeah.
people where they're at because yeah, most people are like, wait, no television?
Yeah. Yeah. We've watched a lot. I mean, this is not to say we don't watch any TV. We have like a computer monitor that we flip
Mhm.
around, especially when the Warriors are in the playoffs or, the World Cup is on, and we watch TV. We'll watch a show or two a week,
Yeah.
I'd say. So
Yeah.
yeah, I feel that. And when Joaquin's older, I think like he will be watching a screen that like we can't hide that from him forever.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things. I
Yeah.
was only allowed 30 minutes of TV a day when I was a kid, and I had to choose it very carefully, and I had to negotiate. My bedtime was 8, but I negotiated. I traded a couple of those nights of TV so that I could watch a full hour of PBS Nature on Sundays from 8 to 9 and stay up an hour past my bedtime.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm
so
surprised
that's like my TV
yeah.
experience. That's what I'm coming from.
I'm surprised it was in Nova.
Nova came on later. I
Oh,
couldn't.
that's true. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Nova
Um,
was interesting. I was always more into the life sciences than I was into the physical sciences.
yeah. Me too. Nova felt a bit um distant,
Yeah.
like figuratively and literally, but nature and animals and it just felt so much more accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Any big regrets in life so far?
This is like kind of a downer of a question, Larry. I remember I remember from like kind of an early age, like as a kid even, telling myself like I didn't want to have regrets. Like I would rather like take risks than have regrets. And that has led me to do some stuff that maybe was a little bit on the edge, like jumping off a 30-foot bridge or taking a solo trip to certain places. But um I've used that framework in decision making throughout my life of like, is not doing this something I would regret? I'm like more afraid to regret not doing something than doing something, because I think you can always learn from doing something, but not doing something, you'll never know what you missed out on. So I don't have a ton. I think the biggest one, going back to nature, was I dropped out of AP Bio in high school because I didn't want to do summer homework, and I was always fascinated with biology and nature, and still very much am, and like could imagine myself as having gone down a path that took me towards the sciences much more. And at points in my life I've like really felt like I wished I had dedicated time to learning and studying the sciences and exploring that as a career path. So that's like the biggest one, is that I didn't like chart a path for myself in the sciences from an early age. I've kind of been a jack of all trades my whole life, and I think that's one of my favorite things about myself. And I think it's also maybe at times inhibited my ability to to really um, flourish in a very specific field of study or practice.
That's a good regret to have. But here you are today, right? It's something I think that's probably the main point you're making. Like if you just live your life with a principled way of making decisions where you try to make the best of it, you won't have so many regrets. Yeah. And finally, the what's lacking question.
Yeah.
What's your favorite book, movie, and album of all time?
Yeah. Okay. Book, The Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin.
Okay.
Movie.
Wait, can you give us a brief synopsis of that book and why you like it? You know?
Yeah, yeah. Or do you want me to go back at like, or do you want to like ask me after I tell them all?
Oh yeah, good. Up
What
to
do you
you. Go
want?
ahead.
Your
No, go
your
ahead. I feel like
um
you were trying to say all three, and then give me yeah.
yeah, let me tell them. I think my favorite movie is The Empire Strikes Back, Star Wars, Episode 5. And my favorite album is Kind of Blue by Miles Davis. The word favorite was hard for me, and I decided to interpret it as saying like these are the things that probably had either a very big impact on, like they influenced me greatly, or I've come back to over the course of my life. So The Wizard of Earthsea is the first of a series of books that Ursula K. Le Guin, who is a female sci-fi writer from Berkeley, wrote. It was also, I think, like her first, what I guess would be termed like young adult book. Um, and it's sci-fi fantasy about a whole world. Have you ever read it?
No.
Okay. It's sci-fi fantasy about a whole world. So she creates this world, and the world is made up out of a giant sea with a bunch of islands. And she creates this entire history for this world that's, like the best sci-fi fantasy writers do. That's like woven into the stories. And The Wizard of Earthsea is the first of a series, and it's about a a young boy who is an orphan for all intents and purposes that is discovered to have fantastic magical abilities, and there's like a magical society within this world in which people have varying degrees of control over magic and aptitude with magic. And he is discovered to have great abilities and goes on to become very successful in the world of wizardry. And the first book is a story about his own development and internal struggle, um, which plays into this kind of which explores this idea of coexisting with both light and darkness in the world and inside each of us, and also developing our own identity as we grow, which I loved. But I think also there's the way that magic works in this world, without giving too much away, that is really cool, is there's this fundamental orientation around names and knowing and like really knowing things.
Hmm.
And so every person in the world has a use name, like Larry or Joel would be, um and then like and I forget what the term, but like an own name or a deep name that almost nobody knows, but that's like your true name. And the
Hmm.
true name, only the person who gives you your true name, which is oftentimes a sorcerer or a wizard in your community, and like your partner, your life partner, like very few people know your true name, and you don't trust people with it unless unless you have like a very deep relationship. It's like an honor to be trusted with someone's true name. um and once you know someone's true name, or once you know a thing's true name, like an animal's true name or a mountain's true name, or a tree's true name, you have a certain amount of control over that thing or that person, because you have now knowledge of like their essence and their
Yeah.
soul. And so like to be able to control, once you learn the true name of a bird, you can call it to you. And once you learn the true name of a forest, you can like understand it better. um and so I love that idea of like knowledge, the acquisition of knowledge as a form of magic, and like knowing and understanding as a form of magic. I thought was really, really, really cool. And there's like, in it, there's wizards who do nothing but like spend their whole life walking the world and like trying to learn the true names of all the animals and plants, because that to them is like the pinnacle of magic, is
Hmm.
being in deep community with those things and knowing them truly. So I always thought that was sweet. And a lot of the time he spent like traveling on a boat, because it's a big sea world with lots of little islands. And as a kid, she draws a map of the whole world in the beginning of it. And as a kid, I just like loved imagining being on a boat and just like exploring all these different islands. So that's that. I don't have a great reason for The Empire Strikes Back, except for like we would go get we'd rent like one VCR movie every Friday, and that was the one that I picked most often as a kid. And like it's still the one that sometimes I like think about, like, oh, I would watch that tonight, like that'd be fun. So it's still I still love it. Forgetting Sarah Marshall would be another one that like I think I could watch that and laugh every time.
I love that movie. Oh.
It's so good. It's so good. And then Kind of Blue, man. I still remember the first time I heard Kind of Blue. I was at a museum in San Francisco. My parents had dragged me along, and I was going to see Calder. Are you familiar with Calder?
Hmm.
He does he's most famous for big mobiles that they're mobile, so they spin, they turn, they're like free moving, and they're painted in lots of bright primary colors. Okay. I hadn't, I must have been like somewhere between 7 and 10 probably, and had never heard of it before, and was not super happy to be spending my weekend morning at a museum. But we had the audio tour, and the audio tour was like linked to rooms, so when you walk into a room, audio would automatically start playing. And I remember I walked up, I was probably sulking and like bored, and we hadn't gotten to the Calder exhibit yet, but we were walking up to the Calder exhibit, and I get to the door of the room, and this music comes on in my headphones that I'm not sure if I'd ever heard before, but I'd never listened to it before if I had heard it. And it was those first, bass lines of Kind of Blue. Dum da dum da dum da dum dum dum. And I remember being like, whoa, what is this? And I turned the corner, and there was this like giant Calder mobile, just like bright colors, like spinning like softly. And I was like, oh my God, what is this? And to this day, like that album and Calder mobiles have been two of my favorite. Yeah, Calder I would say is like one of my favorite artists, and his mobile specifically, I still find captivating. And Kind of Blue is an album that I go back to and listen to, like if not monthly, then like probably every 5 to 6 weeks. And it's influenced like I love hip hop and rap, and like my two favorite songs I would say are 93 Till Infinity by Souls of Mischief, and The Blast by Talib Kweli and DJ High Tech. And they both have like these strong jazz foundations to them. And so that like jazz foundation within hip hop of a certain era is still something that I love, and I think has probably been influenced by that one song and that one album that then set me on a path to listen to a lot more kind of early jazz.
Two great songs, great album by Miles Davis too. Well, it's been great. Love the conversation as always. You're one of those people that I look forward to always chatting and just having these casual, deep conversations with. So want to say thank you, and I appreciate it, and look forward to speaking again.
All right. Well, I appreciate you. Always appreciate the conversation. And I look forward to many more to come. Here's to what's lacking.